Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and Elden Ring and the Things You Didn't Know series. Today marks the 50th episode of this ridiculous series where we've talked so much about so many different things, useful mechanical details, weird bugs and interactions, exploring the world of Elden Ring, its lore and speculation. And we've talked about things big, small, grand or otherwise. It's been a hell of a journey. And without you guys and your input, it certainly wouldn't have reached 50 episodes. So as always, thank you. But without any further ado, let's begin today's episode. To kick off episode 50 then, I'd like to highlight a specific person and their account. ScaleEdit on Twitter is a game capture artist who was brought to my attention recently thanks to just the algorithm. Whether it's the official gameplay trailers or say those little snippets of information about specific items and armor that the Elden Ring official account on Twitter and other platforms posts about, they feature these incredible cinematic shots that are really satisfying, taking a look at Elden Ring from different perspectives, making use of a free camera and really highlighting the details of things that we often would miss just in our own gameplay. This is really cinematic and satisfying stuff, and I always enjoy seeing them. And it wasn't until very recently that I found ScaleEdit is the person behind a lot of this. They work freelance and work to create these really incredible cinematic shots and scenes for them to then officially use. Just scrolling his Twitter, you will see not just countless really cool screenshots, videos and imagery of Elden Ring, but also other projects and other games that he's done exactly this for. And it's honestly phenomenal. If you're ever interested in the idea of really nice wallpapers or screenshots from the game or various games in general, this account is definitely like a must follow. And I want to highlight a post they made on May 9th in which they request you make suggestions on what type of things to focus on. What faction or group or individual would you like to see these cinematic shots and details from? So there's a little shout out to ScaleEdit. Please check them out. Next, we have one from you guys in the comments from Adam Maek, who talks about an incredible trick to do with extending weapons, such as whips. This is absolutely fantastic and one of my favorite things to include in a series like this. It's just something that's very clearly not intended, but basically, if you have a weapon that can extend its range when you attack it, such as obviously a whip like I hold here, let's say you're crouching, you're sneaking, you're moving around. While moving, pull up the equipment menu and go equip a different weapon. And that's one that should normally be extended or extend when it attacks anyway. See this? Look at my whip. This is what it looks like when it's not extended. And now I've got like a sword whip. Basically, the moment that I stand still, it's going to go back to what it should do. But if I'm moving when re-equipping, it becomes like a rapier with a crossguard, this very strange whip. And as you can see, it works with different types. This is a more girthy one. And even works with other weapons, like I say, that weapons that, you know, extend during their attack, like the flowing weapons and Nox flowing weapons. So this sword here, as you can see when I stand still, is more of a sickle shape, but when I equip it while moving, while crouching, for some reason it's just this really long extended blade. It's absolutely fantastic. It's just so silly. It's incredible that weird bugs like this exist in the game so long after its release at this point, and the fact that I was completely unaware of this until this episode is impressive. So a huge shout out and thank you, Adam. That was fantastic. If you guys know anything weird like that, then let me know in the comments. Speaking of which, I'm excited to include two in this episode. This next one comes from another in the comments, Yajek's Infimite, which I really hope I pronounced correctly, talked about the coded sword and how if you use it with another straight sword in power stance, there's this strange thing that's occurring. Let's take this weapon in particular where we can use the carrying grandeur. Now, I don't have the stats to actually use the animation, but that's fine because we get to see what's happening here. Basically, what you can see with the coded sword is this magical faith-based blade that's coming out of this crossguard. So as I two-hand my main weapon, you can see what happens. The grip actually is still there on my hip. It's just the sort of magical faith-based ability of this weapon is deactivated when I'm two-handing the main weapon. But for some reason, when you're using certain Ashes of War in this power stance sort of state, the faith blade remains even while the grip goes onto your hip. So let's take a look. See how it's sticking out of the weapon? It's like I'm still holding it and you can see the faith effect, but then he goes to like re-equip the weapon from its sheathed state. And it happens with various Ashes of War and the particular effects. So this one is a ranged attack. And as you can see, I have this sort of magical blade just sticking out of my hand. And then I re-equip it at the end just like before. With the Sword of St. Trina, when I'm using the sleep effect, I just have this weird kind of like yellow lightsaber sticking out of the palm of my hand while I do this, and the grip is completely gone until I re-equip it, like so. Apparently the one they noticed this on in particular was the Sword of Night and Flame when you're in that stance, and yeah, you can really see it here as it just kind of sticks through my own hand. While I prepare to use one of the two options of the Sword of Night and Flame, it's just sticking through, and now it's through my own skull. That can't be good for me. But you can see how the grip is actually on my hip, and that's where that effect should actually be, or at very least deactivated with this Ash of War. It's so interesting, the amount of strange VFX things we found recently that are still in the game are still bugged, but it's cool to see the strange things that still exist in the game at this point. So great find there. This next one is just a funny clip to look at that I want to share in the series. Something I've been experiencing in the arena with the new matchmaking PvP since 1.08 is some very strange lag occasionally when I load into the arena. There seems to be sort of a consistent bug where my opponent just bugs out and I bug out, and there's a lot of lag where I'm hitting him and he's taking no damage while I'm getting hit by him and he sees me taking no damage, and it leads to some really weird stuff. And my favorite thing I've ever seen from that was a clip on Twitter today from Juno GLRR, or at JGLRR. This incredible moment where he encounters one of those weird bugs where they're both just lagging out and can't really hit each other in a normal way. And ultimately he is defeated and killed in that encounter. Except suddenly he hasn't been defeated and he's back for a quick backstab. This man's not done fighting, it was only a flesh wound. Personally, I've had quite a few strange lag encounters in the arena because of stuff like this, but this is going to be my favorite one I've seen, so I wanted to highlight it. Next, we have a quick follow-up one from the previous episode, where we were looking at the Lake of Rot and how the Kindred of Rot are worshipping that specific location in the middle of the Lake of Rot. We had a lot of discussions about the Scorpion Stinger Dagger and its origins, and those have been really interesting. But one thing I brought up is something commented on that episode, that there's this giant statue above that very specific point. And what if that statue that's enshrouded by the red mist is an important character of the faction of the Outer God of Rot? Very hard to make out the statue with that fog, so I asked you guys, what do you think this is? Who do you think that is? And we had a lot of comments about it, and we probably have a good answer, which is why I'm standing here in the Mohgwyn Dynasty area right next to the mausoleum entrance, because behind me appears to be the exact same statue model. Eric Owens in the comments was talking about how he believes that's the bearded sort of dynasty guy you see in the ancient ruins, and in particular here Mohgwyn's palace. He suggests that this could be an early proponent of the Great Tree or Old Tree culture before the Erdtree was what it is as we know now, but it's very clear that it's an important character because it's all over the underground sections of the game. But then it was Simon Alcazar in the comments that followed up on that, and how he's actually holding a tablet between his arms. Here in the old palace ruins, we get a proper look at this figure with these statues here that aren't decrepit and falling to pieces, but are very clearly that character. The same giant statue of the same man or character in various places. Mohgwyn Dynasty area as well, and then obviously in the Scarlet Rot area. Simone Alcazar was talking about how this is specifically in Old Palace, where, you know, we're finding these statues in better condition and more of them. In the Old Palace ruins on the north side and the south side, you can find these statues and this person. And this commenter suggests that the kindred that were worshipping the Stinger were not paying any attention to the statue above. It's just that these ruins existed long ago and that people built up on top of them or took over those areas and used them for something else. It being suggested that maybe this lost civilization of Old, if that's actually its name, could have existed long before the factions we know in these areas. Interesting speculation and lore there though, and nice to finally look at these guys and maybe have at least some sort of answer. Since he is holding the tablet and holding it to his bosom, and then on the bottom of the tablet there's a tree, I do agree that it could be this Great Tree culture or the Crucible culture that was before the Erdtree and the Golden Order as we know it. This faction potentially crushed under the Golden Order. Let me know what you guys think though, if you have any information or thoughts about this. And finally for today's episode, a last word on the ranged weapons of Elden Ring. The bows, the crossbows, the great bows, and of course the giant heavy crossbow here, the hand ballista. These are really cool concepts, but as we've talked about in the series, a little bit lacking on the mechanics in Elden Ring. It's a shame because, as we talked about, in Bloodborne you had a transforming bow that was both melee weapon and bow, and you can even use arrows as melee attacks. While yes, we do have, say, the various Ashes of War, like not a ranged one on this one, or Barrage to be able to fire really quickly with certain bows, and Mighty Shot and so on, they're just not very mechanically interesting. Beyond the jump attack and the roll attack being slightly faster than just standing with certain bows, there isn't much to the mechanics beyond that. So I asked you guys, what would you like to see in the future of Elden Ring? Perhaps in the DLC, they'll add a new bow or new bow mechanics. What would you suggest? Jetblade in the comments talked about how we could do, say, grappling or tethering. Much like you use gravity arrows or gravity effects to pull people in, you could pull people off ledges by shooting them with something you have, say, attached to a rope and pulling them, or giving you a way to climb up something. That would be really cool. Even if you could say have gravity arrows where you shoot to a specific point and then blow them away or pull them into a point at range. That's in-game mechanics right there on certain Ashes of War, so it's entirely possible. Midnight Shade suggested like a butterfly blade, much like the Bloodborne one. Let's have a transforming bow that is, say, 2 dual curved swords that can turn into a short bow. That'd be cool. Where Frank Sunderland suggested just much more headshot damage, so that you're actually rewarded for accurately shooting targets in critical spots. If we were thinking of actual things we could see in Elden Ring without big mechanic introductions, you could just add, say, a faith bow that just destroys undead, fire or lightning bows. These would be very doable, and you could give them some unique Ashes of War tied to that element. We could even see, say, a unique bow that uses FP instead of arrows every time you fire, so you never run out. That comes from Kuronami in the comments. Or Brady Hansen in the comments, who just suggests like a Scarlet Rot bow that has much better Scarlet Rot build-up than any other weapon, or at least give us another Scarlet Rot weapon. There aren't many. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight some of the more interesting suggestions for the bow and this lacking weapon type in Elden Ring, especially the few ones that are entirely doable and could be added in the DLC. As much as I'd love to see transforming bows and weapons that can be used as melee and ranged, they'd have to introduce new mechanics to the game, like proper trick weapons, so I'm less sure about that. But thank you for getting involved with that. Those are some great suggestions. But there you have it, another episode of Things You Didn't Know in Elden Ring, featuring some interesting speculation suggestions for the future of the game. 50 episodes. I can easily say this would not be remotely possible without this type of back and forth, without suggestions, speculation, without follow-ups to topics that I bring up. While I do search Reddit and Twitter and other forms of social media for interesting topics and play the game a lot myself, there's just no way I would have made it remotely this far if it wasn't for you guys saying, hey, did you know you could do this? Or bringing up topics to look into. It's entirely kept this series alive. I've learned so much through this series because of that, and it keeps me logging in and playing the game to this day, even so long after the release. So thank you for getting involved, guys. Thank you for keeping this series alive. And as always, if you have anything interesting that we haven't seen or talked about in the series, a lore detail, speculation, a follow-up to something we talked about in this episode or another one, let me know in the comments and we might just talk about it. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.